I will analyze topics such as oceanography, plate tectonics, and the hydrologic cycle. The goal is not to judge religious belief, but to apply earth science concepts to evaluate how these descriptions are described and whether they align with scientific explanations. So, a quick introduction to the Quran. The Quran is the central religious text of Islam, believed by Muslims to be a revelation directly from God to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the 7th century. Many Muslims also believe that the Quran contains descriptions of natural phenomena that appear to align with modern scientific discoveries. These interpretations are often referred to as scientific miracles. Let's begin with the topic of oceans. The Quran states in chapter 25, verse 53, He has let loose the two seas, one fresh and one salty, and between them is a barrier and a forbidden partition. And in another chapter, it mentions, He released the two seas, meeting side by side. Between them is a barrier they do not cross. In Islamic interpretation, classical scholars such as Ibn Kathir explains these verses as describing bodies of water that meet but maintain distinct characteristics. So, at this point, we have a description in the Quran that emphasizes a kind of separation or boundary between different bodies of water. Now let's take a look at what modern earth science says about this phenomenon. Modern oceanography shows that when two bodies of water meet, they do not always mix immediately. Differences in salinity, temperature, and density can create visible and physical boundaries between them. These transition zones are known as haloclines and thermoclines. For example, where fresh water from rivers meet salt water from oceans, the water can appear visually separated for some distance before gradually mixing. Similar phenomena occur when different seas meet, such as the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. However, scientific research also shows that these waters are not permanently separated. Ocean currents, diffusion, tides, and turbulence continuously mix water masses over time. Because of this, earth science does not support the idea of an absolute physical barrier between seas. Instead, it explains these boundaries as dynamic zones created by physical properties of water. Now let's move on to mountains. In chapter 78, verse 6, it states, Have we not made the earth a resting place and the mountains as pegs? In Islamic interpretation, the Arabic word that is translated as pegs is often understood as describing mountains as deeply embedded structures within the earth. Classical and modern Islamic scholars explain that a peg is not only visible above the surface, but also extends deeply below the ground, similar to the way mountains extend beneath the earth's surface. Modern geology provides an interesting comparison to this interpretation. Earth scientists have discovered that mountains possess deep roots extending far beneath the surface through a process known as isostasy. These roots form because lighter continental crust floats on denser material, similar to how an iceberg extends below water. Seismic and gravitational measurements confirm the existence of these deep structures beneath major mountain ranges like the Himalayas. Mountains are also formed through tectonic plate collisions. When plates collide, the crust compresses, thickens, and is pushed upward, forming large mountain ranges over millions of years. At this point, some Islamic scholars and modern commentators draw a connection between the Quranic description of mountains as pegs and the scientific idea of deep roots. The similarity is often described as conceptual rather than literal, meaning the language in the Quran is seen as broadly consistent with the idea of deep anchoring structures in geology. Now let's move on to the final topic, the hydrologic cycle. In chapter 23, verse 18, it states, "And we send down from the sky water in due measure, and we cause it to settle in the earth." Then in chapter 30, verse 48, it states, "And God sends the winds, and they stir the clouds. Then he spreads them across the sky." In Islamic interpretation, these verses are understood as describing the organized and life sustaining process of rainfall and water distribution on earth. Modern earth science describes rainfall through the hydrologic cycle. Water evaporates from oceans, lakes, and land due to solar energy, rises into the atmosphere, condenses into clouds, and then falls back to earth as precipitation. Wind patterns also play a key role in transporting moisture and forming cloud systems across the planet. So, scientifically, rainfall is part of a continuous global cycle driven by physical processes such as evaporation, condensation, atmospheric pressure, and temperature changes. Now that we've looked at all three topics, we can compare the two perspectives. Across oceans, mountains, and rainfall, there are some conceptual similarities. Oceans can show temporary separation due to physical differences. Mountains extend deep beneath the Earth's surface. Rain operates through a continuous cycle involving atmosphere and water movements. However, earth science explains all of these processes through measurable physical mechanisms based on observation, experimentation, and modeling. In conclusion, this project explored whether descriptions of natural phenomena in the Quran align with modern earth science. The analysis shows that there are some conceptual similarities between Quranic descriptions and scientific observations, especially in the general description of natural patterns and structures. However, earth science provides detailed explanations based on data and scientific theory. Therefore, the relationship between the Quranic and earth science in this context is best described as conceptual similarity and interpretive comparison rather than direct scientific equivalence.